Turtle Logic and the University of Life, Chapter 12, Albert. I left the class and walked into the hall. Standing there in a rather strange building, I felt somewhat removed from the rest of the university, with its provincial atmosphere and high royalty. Here, I was in a contemporary structure with a cosmopolitan feel to it. There was tall, clean white walls and minimalist feel to the building. Alfred the Turtle stood not far from where I found myself as I exited the classroom. I could tell that he was on his way to his next class, which I was sure would be my next class as well. His route, though, was always a bit different than mine. He seemed to get to where he was going a little faster and from a different direction than the one I was coming from. This time, though, there he was, right beside me. How unusual, I thought, and so I looked over at him and ventured to offer the courtesy of hello. "So where do we go next?" I asked Alfred. I hadn't looked at my list yet. You see, I was still getting my coat on from the last class. I hadn't yet had a chance to research where it was that I was to go next. I'm sure Alfred knew, though, for he was clearly headed in a defined, predetermined direction with his usual stride of purpose and authority in his step. That's why I asked him. "So, you would like to know where we go next?" he questioned. As usual, he would start the answer to my question with a repeat of what I said to clarify. This is standard mirroring 101 stuff. "Yes," I responded. "Where do we go next?" "Now that depends on where you've been." "Well, you know where I've been. I was just there with you," to which I responded. "Where you think you have been and where I think you have been are two different things. Looking at where you may be going from my universe is not going to be the same as looking to where you are going from your universe." "Alfred, what do you mean by that?" He looked at me, took a short but deep breath, and continued. "I have someone I'd like you to meet. Come this way." So we turned the corner of the building and headed across the big red brick walkway, up some metal stairs, and into another rather contemporary-looking addition across the way. He entered the classroom, where stood a short little man with a long white flowing hair and a white, slightly overstretched button-down work shirt. This man stood at a blackboard full of mathematical equations written from one end to the other in white chalk. "Albert," the turtle beckoned. "Alfred, my friend, how are you?" the man said as he turned and faced us. "I'd like you to meet Albert." "I'd like you to meet Albert," Alfred said to me. "Albert Einstein." And there he stood in all his glory, one of the greatest minds of our time, Albert Einstein. He brushed away some chalk on his hand and reached out and shook mine with authority. "Hello," he said in a strong German accent. "Hello to you." Albert laughed a bit. "Alfred, are you going to have that conversation on relativity all over again?" "Possibly," replied the turtle, turning to me with a slight grin to one side of his face. "We've had that conversation from time to time. It's quite enjoyable to talk to Albert about this principle, the principle of relativity." The turtle continued to talk to me, with Albert listening quietly out of one ear while he continued his mathematical equations on the board. We often have a dialogue that looks at our individual points of view, which is really about our sense and the relative position of another individual's point of view as it relates to ours. I want to share with you a way of looking at successful relationships that may take us all the way into nuclear physics. I hope this trip will be enjoyable. Recently, I read a book by Albert. In it, he explained how he came to reach to teach relativity and E equals mc squared. As I was reading, I began to think about the journeys and adventures I've been on developing my great relationship with Mrs. Turtle. So I came to Albert with what I had found. "Oh yes, Albert, you have been coming to me with what you have found for quite a while," Albert added. "Yes," continued the turtle as he looked over at Albert. "Albert, could you explain your theory on this and how it applies to what I'm teaching?" "Sure, Alfred." Alfred's work is very interesting. It involves people in relationships and how these people relate to others in their world. I also enjoy looking at relationships and how they relate to each other. Through my work, I have looked at the world of physics and the relationships of a different medium, that of space and time. This this investigation has led me to this discovery that light travels at a specific speed and that the speed of light is relative to its position to other objects in space. Before I came along, it was believed that when you saw something, the image was brought to you instantaneously. But scientific discovery and the application of the theories regarding speed and time have yielded a new way of thinking. This is the notion of relativity. This principle of relativity applies to Alfred's work as well. So there I was in the classroom with Albert Einstein conversing about the theory of relativity and how it related to relationships. Relativity, it seems, is not only happens between actual objects, but between people as well. It all started, he continued, with my investigation into the rotation of one of the moons of Saturn, and led to the clarity that light travels at a speed that can be measured. I began to ponder what things would look like if objects and people traveled away or towards each other at nearer and nearer the speed of light. Two things amused me. The first was about the point of view of the observers. I imagined a person standing on the Earth looking at a spaceship traveling away at nearly the speed of light. I imagined a person in the speeding spaceship looking back at Earth. I pondered these two points of view. To me, clearly, the behavior of and the look of the spaceship would change as it came closer to the speed of light. That is, from the point of view of the Earth observer. Simultaneously, the shape of the Earth would change from the point of view of the speeding observer in the spaceship. So I started to use the word relative to as a way of referring to what point of view I was considering. One thing I held on to was that the experience of, say, drinking a glass of water would continue to be the same for both observers. There would be no change in the observer's immediate experiences. Then Alfred interjected, and an assuming part of me is the seemingly prosperous question, which is which? Which was the speeding thing, the Earth or the spaceship? He said with a laugh. Albert continued, actually, you see, there is no way to know. The answer was relative to the person you asked. The answer was, it is relative. I actually have begun to dislike the term relativity because people seem to use it in a way that anything goes or that there is nothing solid. I had never suggested that. What I was trying to do was find the reliable, solid law that helps people relate when their solid points of view were so radically different. There were no rules. The laws that predicted the differences in the point of view, that is. Yes, Alfred responded. What I have been doing for years is developing the rules of relationship. The solid rules that people get along comfortably while they have different points of relevance. Mr. Einstein looked over at me and with a slight grin and interjected once again. You see, the world in which I lived did not want to ask the question, which is the speeding thing, the Earth or the spaceship? The world of my time knew which was which, and what I was doing was challenging that world. Alfred has a wonderful theory on this. You call it military think, don't you, Alfred? Tell him, the great mathematician stated. The turtle then continued. Yes, as I see it, for thousands of years, people have been led into a kind of thinking I call military think. I do not believe this kind of thinking, this way of seeing things is natural. I believe it is trained into almost all humans at an early age. This training is most clear if you go to boot camp or basic training in the Army or Navy or Air Force or police academy for that matter. These great human military think institutions where you will experience the teaching of military think at its most concentrated level. I believe the prime function of this basic training is to alter the recruits' thinking about their points of view about reality. Here is my encapsulation of the prime rule of boot camp and military think. At any point of time, there is one and only one person whose point of view is important. Put 10 soldiers together, and in a short order, they will all know who is the senior person who's in charge, whose point of view counts. When 5 or more soldiers join and the 10 already present, there will be a few moments while they all survey the group to see whose point of view is important again. My experience in talking to people who have been in the service that eventually they will feel uncomfortable when it's not clear who is in charge. It's almost taught them to recognize when it was the senior person and when it was the obedient one. You see, the principal purpose of military think is to make quick decisions possible. I believe there is nowhere that quick decisions making is more important than in the human military. It's pretty important on boats, airplanes, and even driving a car. It is why you only have one steering wheel in a car. You see, much of the human society runs on military think. Families, associations, businesses, communities, states, counties, churches, religions, etc. Your popular talk radio and politics abounds with military think. You call it hierarchy, but I prefer military think, as it is the term that points to the fundamentals. Most novels are written using military think. The author writes as though he or she knows everything. There is no other point of view. This is called the third person omniscient. The military think and military think immediately solves the problem that Albert asked, which is moving away. Just ask the one who is in charge. Because we are so familiar with military think, I believe we have many words that would not otherwise exist. Here's my list: right, wrong, correct, true, factual, real, unreal, etc. These words do not refer to anything by themselves. Each one is used to refer to a point of view that is aligned with the view of the one who is in charge. Right is the same as the view of the one who is in charge. Wrong is different from the view from the one who is in charge. What exactly happened yesterday is a recollection that is the same as that of the one who is in charge. Some time ago, I got tired of typing one who is in charge, and I replaced the phrase with the title Master. With that, Albert Einstein broke into the conversation once again. Yes, in my theory of relativity, directly confronted and revised military think. You see, I speak of relativity, and reality is only defined in such a way to include the reference system of the person whose point of view who is involved. I also speak in terms of mathematical rules, the concrete rules of relating these two realities. In physics, this became the study of reality. In human relationships, this is called, and he pointed to Alfred, who quickly finished the sentence with the word dialogue. There was a slight pause, a moment to gather the last floating thoughts in the room. A raised eyebrow and silence finished the conversation off quite nicely, it seemed. Thank you for your time, Albert. We have to run. We have another class to get to, as Alfred extended his right stub of a hand and motioned to me that it was time to go. Thank you, Alfred, I said. It was nice meeting you. And we left. So, Alfred, I spoke out as we walked away. This military think, as you put it, this is regarding the right way and wrong way of seeing the world. Is that correct? Yes, he responded. The human culture that you come from is full of it. Military talk, that is. It seems to me that it is very important in your culture to have a concrete right and wrong. Like I said, this works in many areas, but in the area of relationships, it is quite unproductive. I believe it to actually be a disease that affects your world quite dramatically. I call this disease emotional symbiosis, and most everyone in the human culture suffers from it. Its origins are in the early childhood treatment of babies. Because most humans have it, you will not notice it easy. Awareness of this disease is usually in the way others are infected. Rarely does a diseased person recognize their own infection. It is for this most part the primary disease that infects all those that you saw in the Valley of the Masters. So what is it, I asked as we strolled through the skinny hallway and down towards the flowing gardens below. It is the belief that there is a right way of seeing, describing, understanding, and valuing what is going on. You see, each person perceives things differently. The differences are greater with more abstract issues, such as values, agreement is actually exceedingly rare. The disease shows itself whenever you say the truth is such and such, or you are wrong, or tell me what the right thing to do is. It also has to do with the limited capacity to be aware of, respect, appreciate, comprehend the subjectivity of another. The sufferers think of themselves as the center. Sometimes they put others in the center of a world of correctness. Still, it is their belief, their disorder. For most of it, for most, it is difficult to be aware that others are different and that all are equally unconnected to the right way of seeing. Sufferers tend to think others feel what they feel, see what they see, and value what they value. Everyone likes broccoli. Everyone thinks smokers are bad. I'm a failure and everyone knows it. Everyone's mad at me. You saw it quite fully materialized in the Valley of the Masters. In the Valley, emotional symbiosis has run wild. It flows through that world with an intense verbosity that almost burns the skin. The primary symptom is the tendency to degrade, put down, distance, shame, punish, argue with another person when they act or show disagreement with your way of seeing what is going on. When someone differentiates, when they display that they don't see what we see, etc., the sufferer will put them down crudely, politely, directly, or indirectly. You're too stupid to see it. You don't like rock music. Anyone in their right mind agrees. Well, you're just a kid, a woman, a Democrat, etc. What do you know? Obviously, you're not as smart as you look. You are wrong, absolutely. And there's also nonverbal gestures. I looked at Alfred as we walked. Sure, a lot of the questions were coming into my mind about this. Did I suffer from this disease? Could I look back in my life and see clearly that I was just such a person at times? Many times I had looked at my partner and thought that they made no sense. I feel it around me all the time, in fact. I was certainly affected by this. So, Alfred, I said, how do you know if you're affected, and how do you get out of it? I asked. It's all in validation and pre-validation. I paused. I remember the eagle as he flapped its wings there in the hallway. The eagle told me, validate the shit out of them. That was what he said. I think I am starting to understand what the eagle meant. You're starting to understand this, aren't you? Remember, you are uninformed at the point when you think your partner is doing something odd or that doesn't make sense to you. If you were informed, you wouldn't think it's so odd, and you would see your partner's sense. Only two things prevent you from seeing their sense, and they need to tell you, and you need to listen. So, what do you do to get more informed? I asked. This is a skill, Alfred said, and I've talked about it before. It is the odd dialogue, remember. Oh, yes, the odd dialogue, I remember. There's a process to understand. It's a process you can use and a skill you can practice. And potentially, it can turn into a valuable skill that you can utilize in your life, the turtle added. Remember, he said, this all takes place in conversation. This is a method to utilize during communication. Alfred monitored me to sit on the rock. We had moved out of the big building by that point. He waved his hand down towards a rather large rock and sat there alongside the cobblestone path. I did as he said, and Alfred reached and pulled up a similarly sized rock and sat down as well. So let me go over this briefly one more time so you understand it fully. Here's how it goes. If you find yourself uninformed of your partner's sense and at the edge of a potential argument, stop. Before you react, take a moment and let your lizard relax. Take a good look at your partner. Remember, you picked them out of potentially millions of options given to you in this world. Initiate the process of the odd dialogue and find out and validate just what is going on in them. The understanding you seek will come, I assure you. Though this process of the odd, through the process of this odd dialogue, remember, it is best not to ask why. Stay away from why questions. Use a phrase such as, when you did that, and mention the action, not your interpretation of it. I know it made sense to you. That's the pre-validation. But it seemed odd to me. Could we sit down sometime so you can help me understand you and what you're going through? Then proceed with the conversation. It's your partner's job to tell you their entire story. You just mirror what they say and validate them. That's it, I asked. That's some of it, the turtle responded, but we'll take it one step at a time. I rose from the rock at this point. It was getting hard to sit on such a hard object. I didn't have a shell after all, like the turtle did. So we started to walk once again down the long cobblestone path, and the turtle, after a short time of silence, continued to speak. Pre-validation could very well be the ultimate form of healing for your culture. The heart of your culture seems to come from a place of invalidation, of persuasion. Look inside your heart. I think you will find that you have grown to know that very well. Have you ever felt shame, resentment? These emotions are the internalization of this invalidation in you. I'd like to offer one more thought on this for your consideration. It is my interpretation of these two human emotions, resentment and shame. I'd like to offer for your consideration a way to get beyond the effects you feel from experiencing them. I know that I had a lot of shame and a lot of resentment. There were powerful emotions that had been with me and had been hurting me all of my life. So I listened. Maybe there was an answer to some of these deep personal frustrations regarding my emotions that the turtle could offer me. The first one is shame, the turtle went on. This is a developed habit of invalidating oneself. Heal shame by practice pre-validating on yourself. As you pre-validate others, you will come to break that shame habit. As you validate them, their resentment will vanish as well. Resentment, he continued, this is the memory of having been invalidated. Heal resentment in two ways. First, by validating the original invalidating experience, and second, by validating any invalidating experience that have occurred in the time between the original and the present. Resentment can easily be healed by intentional validating activities by the offender. Alfred offered a pause in our conversation. He looked straight at me there on the cobblestone path, and he said with a smile, "Don't worry, we are all a work in progress. There will be more on this subject to come. For now, I will see you in a few moments in that building over there." Alfred pointed over to a new building across the garden area where we were. This building was another polished modern building, a straight-line structure that jutted upward into the sky with a glossy blue textured stucco finish. "Thank you, Alfred," I responded, and he walked off.